and welcome back. We are such nerds. I'm your ringleader for tonight, Peter, and I've been lying about my nuclear weapons arsenal. Boys, why don't you introduce yourselves for our listeners?
Hi, this is Jason from Hartford, and I am marvelous, truly marvelous.
And I'm Russ from Montclair, and I'm super excited to talk about Dune. Foundation. We're on the Foundation podcast.
Yeah, for our listeners who are just tuning in, we will have many digressions, unfortunately, to the Dune series, more than likely.
I'd just like to clarify that this is not a Star Wars podcast. For those, if you're here for the Star Wars podcast, you clicked on the wrong link. So Try again.
We're many episodes away from the Star Wars podcast. So tune in long enough and you'll probably hear them. Russ, why don't you give us a recap from what we went over last week?
Okay, we're recapping on part 1, which is the psychohistorians. We see that character Gail Dornick travels to Trantor. He is going to work with the famous Hari Seldon, who is known as the Raven, a renowned mathematician. We see that within the first day of arriving that Gail and Hari get together, and they both are arrested because Hari has been pushing a treasonous plan or an idea that the Empire will fall within the next 300 years. And the government feels that he is creating unrest, so they sentence him to be exiled to Terminus. And in the sentencing, Hari is able to negotiate that the several 100,000 people that have been working with him to create this Galactic Encyclopedia should travel there with him to Terminus to complete their project. He, while pushes this narrative that the Empire is about to fall within 300 years, that their work that they are currently doing needs to continue. And so Terminus is the planet in which they can continue that in exile. We also are acknowledging that the Empire is aware of this idea on Trantor, and we see that their negotiation with this sort of reveals a bit of an understanding that they are ready to prepare for this in some way.
So the goal of the encyclopedia is to do what exactly, Russ?
The goal is to collect all human knowledge to keep it safe from the fall. And Hari believes that the fall of mankind will lead to anarchy and chaos and everything being destroyed. And so this is a preservation project to maintain all human knowledge so that post-apocalyptic time, people still have access to all the previously learned knowledge.
Right. Effectively shortening the period of darkness, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great. So that was pretty great, Russ. Jay, looks like we got some fan mail from last week. You want to go ahead and open up that letter for us?
Yeah.
From our one listener?
Actually, there's a few. I'll call them fan comments. I don't know if we don't really. I mean, none of this came by snail mail, but yeah. So apparently there's some folks who have some questions for us out there, and we've done a job to change the names to protect the innocent, but I can say that all of these questions were written by a real person for sure. So we've gotten some things in from. From folks who have listened to our first episode, and I guess I'll lay it out there. So the first one is from Jonesing for a Break from Nonfiction, and they say, "Wow, love the tunes. Who is the amazing band or musician that you had write those wicked riffs for you guys? Uber jealous. I wish I could play like that." So
Jason, why don't you tell them who wrote those?
All right, I'll take this one. So yeah, firstly, thank you very much for the props. We really appreciate it. We do like the tunes. They are actually written by myself, but I can't claim full credit because my young son did generate the keyboard riff that created the kind of anchor for our intro, and a good friend and relative has provided our vocals to add a little life to the music there. So thank you for that question. The next one, should I keep going?
Yeah, definitely keep going.
Okay, all right, yeah, there's a few more here. So
this is pod gold right here.
All right. So the next question, this is for, I think this is for Russ, but you guys tell me if Russ is the right one to answer this. So this is from Dredding, spelled Dredding, episode 2, If Russell Doesn't Explain His Fascination with Judge Dredd. And they ask, Russ, can you explain your fascination with Judge Dredd? So why don't you take it away, Russ?
Oh, it's such a deep rabbit hole. Where do I begin? Let's just first start with the actual original Stallone movie that I watched as a young child, and my fascination with it merely just pivoted on the point of somehow it had popped into my head about the city walls that we were talking about. It's very similar to like a Total Recall style environment, but I actually had played Judge Dredd in Sega. If you guys remember, it was a Sega Genesis game, and it was pretty wicked because you were the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and there's nothing better than a Stallone, I am the law.
I am the law.
I mean, you can use that meme. It's ubiquitous. It's a very robust platform that I feel I can use throughout my entire life. So I'm looking forward to continuing the memeing of Stallone and Dredd.
Perfect. Love it. So let's get into this week's chapter.
Hold on. Section. I think
we got more.
Yeah, no, yeah, we got some additional ones. This one, I think I'll let you guys figure out who should answer this one. I'm pretty sure it's not me, but this is from Hypnotized ... And they ask, Peter, can I hire you to record yourself reading all of my favorite books?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that for the exchange of food or money. I also take favors of any style.
There's more fan mail. There's just so many fans out there.
So many. Out of our 26
I can't even say without. I can't even say with a straight face.
Well, I appreciate our 26 listeners who have actually taken the time to comment on the web zone, as it were. So why don't we kick it into... to be fair, we are just getting going here, and there have been a few downloads of our initial episode, so hopefully we'll get some momentum, and maybe we will be drowning in fan mail, but that is the end of the list for today, Peter. So yeah, we can move forward. And that wraps up our wonderful fan mail. So I'd like to thank our 3 listeners for writing in this week. Jason, why don't you give us a rundown of what we are getting into this week?
All right. So the section is called the Encyclopedists, and no surprise, it is about the kind of the future after exile to Terminus. And so we start the second section 50 years after Harry Seldon's trial and at the end of the first section. And there is now not just a couple 100,000, but the population of about 1 million people on Terminus, basically in one big city on a relatively habitable planet without that many resources. They are mostly doing non-encyclopedia related work, although there is still a core group of scientists working on the encyclopedia. led by a council. They have finally agreed to set up a local administrative, I'll say, political municipality or something to that effect, where they have now established a mayor position in parallel with this council of the Foundation. The mayor is Salvor Hardin, and he becomes our new point of view character for the section. He's what I would call an ambitious politician, but he's also pretty savvy and is one of the few people on the planet that actually had studied psychology or psychohistory, unlike everybody else who had nothing to do with psychohistory. During the course of the section, it becomes pretty clear that the Galactic Empire is shaky at best, and the periphery has clearly factioned. The local or nearby prefect of Anacreon has made a threat of colonizing Terminus, and after an empty promise from the Empire to quote-unquote protect Terminus, Hardin recognizes that that threat is meaningless, and he can't rely on the Council to take the necessary action to protect the population of Terminus. So there's kind of two key ticking clocks happening at the same time. One is a threat from Anacreon that puts kind of a clear timeline on their plans to establish a colony on Terminus and divide up the land for their nobles. And at the same time, there's a planned opening of a digital vault from which at least the council is planning to hear a message and instructions from Harry Seldon, knowing that he had a sense of what was going to happen, but apparently didn't tell anybody. They are hoping that he will offer the solution to their ills.
And we get to see the end of that at the end of the chapter, right?
Yes, yeah. I didn't want to overexpose right here at the beginning. Maybe, take it easy for now and work up to it by the end of the pod. So,
I think that's great. Now, I'd like to go a little bit more into this Hardin character. He's really, really savvy. He's probably the smartest dude on Terminus, as far as I'm concerned. So when they get this threat from Anacreon, Russ, why don't you tell him what he comes up with to kind of keep these guys off, staved at bay? They don't have any defenses. They don't have any resources. They can't bribe these guys. What does he do?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that he's aware, or there's a big difference that's put out there about him as opposed to scientists and how he interacts with people, where it's pretty clear that the scientists just want the answers, where Hardin goes in and he actually talks to the people trying to ferret out what their plans are. So there's a couple instances where you see the scientists just be like, stop talking. Why would you bring that up? And he sort of reveals that he's trying to get these visitors to show their cards as to, why they're there. And so we have one instance where he mentions that this is a planet that does use nuclear power. And this apparently is not something that's being used in the periphery, these cluster of planets on the outside of the Galactic Empire. And so that sparks interest in this visitor that they could potentially have things like nuclear weapons, although they don't, and their nuclear reactor's old. It definitely sparks some intuition or a game that's being played by Hardin that the other scientists can't see what's happening. Right.
So Hardin makes the threat of nuclear retaliation in a very veiled way to the Anacreon envoy, a guy named Hot Roderick. I'll get it right one of these days, guys. And yeah, the scientists freak out. They're like, we don't have any nuclear weapons. Why would you say that? He goes, I know we don't have any nuclear weapons, but they don't know that we don't have nuclear weapons. I'm buying us time so that we can make nuclear weapons because we have this knowledge, we have the means. And I think it's interesting that the Periphery, the implication is that they had some kind of nuclear power at one point, but they ran out of resources or the know-how to keep them running. So now they're back to coal and gasoline, I think they actually refer to in the novel.
Yeah, fossil fuels.
Yeah, which is definitely a sign of the times that this was written. That and the massive consumption of tobacco in its many forms by everybody. So, Jay, why don't you take a hit of some snuff for us?
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
go into what happens next.
That's a good segue, Peter. So I think there's a few things to unpack there. First of all, he's pretty clever about asking leading questions, and he asks a question of this Anacreonian representative of the new Anacreonian king about their I can't remember. I think it's plutonium, right? He asked them if they have plutonium to help them fuel their reactor, and he gets this like wide-eyed response, and then it's actually then he explains afterward to Pyrene, we didn't mention Pyrene, but he's like his antagonist, right? He's the council member who's so like irritated with politics, and he just hates Hardin, and he has no patience for him whatsoever. So anyway, he does this in front of Pyrene, and then Pyrene's giving him the evil eye, like, why are you telling them we have nuclear power? And he's like, well, I was trying to find out if they have nuclear capabilities, and they basically showed their hand because they would have known if they had nuclear capabilities that it's not plutonium that you need, it's uranium, or what. I can't remember if I'm getting this right, which one or the other. And then he talks about then he gives us a sense of how long into the future this is happening, right? He cites the dawn of atomic power was 50,000 years ago, right? And so we get this kind of time frame now, sensibility that from today we're thinking of this universe 50,000 years from now. And exactly. The first thing that came to my mind, Peter, was like, in the last 50 years, tobacco has basically almost gone extinct, right? And yet 50,000 years into the future, Salvor Hardin is all over these vegan tobacco cigars, and Lord Dorwin, without his R's, still manages to, partake in snuff throughout his visit. And, everybody's like, all about this tobacco, and even Roddick, the representative from Anacreon. Yeah, Hot Rod.
He's so hot.
He convinces Hardin to give him a cigar, even though Hardin doesn't want to, because he wants them not to be wasted on an Anacreonian. But
how is vegan tobacco different from regular or carnivorous tobacco?
I don't know what carnivorous tobacco would look like.
Does it eat you, or are you like eating an animal that is also tobacco?
Well, again, this is from like the 40s, that this idea of vegan may not really have represented then what it does now to us as a kind of a dietary regimen.
Wait until you guys read my fanfic with all the vaping that's going on in it for 10,000 years in the future.
Yeah. So, so it's interesting. It's the going back to, we talked about this a little bit last time, is like we have to give cut him a little bit of slack, right? And if we want to enjoy the story, we can't, we have to be a little bit generous that he couldn't necessarily, predict 50 to 70 years out from when he wrote it. So, but we can still try to enjoy the idea, right?
Yeah. But maybe this you could frame it along the lines that one of Hardin's biggest issues is that everything's been stagnant. The Galactic Empire is stagnant. So maybe you can think about it. Yeah, it's been 50,000 years since nuclear fuel, and maybe that's because it satisfied their fuel requirements. And so why look for anything else if what you have works? If it's, don't fix it if it's not broke.
I mean, it goes deeper than that too, right? The whole point of the Encyclopedists is that they are archiving known knowledge. They're not making new knowledge. There's no studying. There's no progression. They are literally just taking old ideas and putting them in one place. Right? And like Hardin seems to resent that on a fundamental level.
Yeah, I think probably to talk about
that's
that.
Like the source of that tension, right? I think between those two characters.
Sorry, I'm getting like excited about. This is this is the kind of stuff I want to dig into. And you're right, he explodes on the council because they think nothing of it, but he sees it as wrong. And you're right, on a fundamental level. But to get there, we have to go through this experience, right? So he has to have this encounter to frame it, where Lord Dorwin comes and visits the planet, and he's this kind of snooty, speaks without pronouncing his R's, right? Unless he gets excited, and then all of a sudden he speaks normally, I guess. Hardin points out. And then so he's trying to like put on airs with this accent of, I'm, so special and I speak differently or whatever. But he goes through this moment where he's like getting on his soapbox a little bit about his, subject of study. And what was it? Archaeology, right? That's his bag.
That's his passion.
And it's not really, archaeology is not really important per se, but the whole setup is that he starts talking about how he studies archaeology. And what he does is he reads the books of people who studied archaeology, and then he evaluates their writings against each other to come to his conclusion. And when Hardin challenges him on that and says, well, why, if you know that it comes from planet X, Y, or Z, why don't you go personally to visit planet X, Y, and Z and study for yourself, And he was like, oh, that's like how crude, and he says, how crude or whatever, why would I redo the work that these experts, from so long ago had already done? Like, I can just read their books and, so you're right. It's this idea that like nobody's using their brain and creating kind of new information or new knowledge. They're just kind of leeching off of the existing supply of knowledge to recreate the same knowledge, basically, right?
Hardin resents the idea that these people aren't experiencing anything firsthand. They're not making anything on their own. For example, the Affont, man with the speech impediment, he reads meta-analyses and then makes his own meta-analyses based off of that without actually considering the original work. It's just layers of stagnation on top of each other without new original thought being contributed. And that's probably what's leading to the death of the empire.
Or at least,
Russ, what do you think about that?
At least an effect of the death of the empire, right? Like that people are just forgot how to do stuff.
They're just little robots, right? Russ, how do you feel about this? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that the underlying theme is that there hasn't been any innovation. And, again, as soon as I saw, 50,000 years in the future and the best they could do was nuclear fuel, like they couldn't come out with some renewable resource that required zero, like they found a way to break the laws of thermodynamics and have just a continual feedback loop of energy. It was like I had to get over that and be like, oh man, like that's just not creative at all. But yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. Like, yeah, stagnation. And this goes back. We talked about this the last podcast, but the influence that leads to that theme. What was happening, or what influenced his perception of this. I'm always curious to know what gets writers to be creative about something, or what do they base that off of. So if I could ever go back and ask him, I'd surely be interested to know why he emulates this.
I think it probably had something to do with a major world event. You might have heard of it. It was called World War III.
Well, I'd like to remind our listeners out there that there were many empires out there that fell over the time, and a world war wasn't the only war that experienced empires that fell. Just to make sure our Potters out there know what's going on.
I feel like you are you're only making that conjecture based on another source that has actually looked at the history directly versus looking at the history directly yourself, Russ.
Are you accusing Russ of using a meta-analysis?
I think
come
you're
up
using
with
a meta-analysis.
He's just regurgitating
exactly.
things that you already heard.
I mean, at one time in my life, I did read The Rise of Alexander by Plutarch, so I feel like I have at least one instance of an empire that rose and fell.
Yeah, but were you in that empire when it rose and fell? That's
what
I want to know.
The way that Plutarch writes it, I feel like I'm right there next to Alexander.
You've got sand in your sandals.
But that's like 300 BC. Alexander only lives to be, I think he only lives to be, what, 30?
Yeah, I want to say he's like 34, maybe.
Yeah, it's like 300 BC is when it takes place, that time, or either that's when he's born and he dies in like 334, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only other instance I know of an empire rising and falling. So
yeah.
I really have a limited scope on.
Yeah, and we actually don't even know if that really happened, right? Because there's no living witnesses.
It was written in a book. Yeah, there's no living witnesses. Yeah.
Well, then how do we even know it's true?
Exactly. Which is why that's why we have to rely on World War II as the crux of all things that happened after World War II, because it's the only real major war that we have, sufficient living witnesses that we can interview. All the other things that people talk about that happened before World War II is probably mostly conjecture and folk tales and myths and things like that.
All right, now that you've gaslit the whole of human history, maybe we can move forward with this conversation a little bit.
Yeah, I'll probably.
So yeah, I think it is.
I
think it is bizarre that they haven't come up with some kind of gravity well technology that they have harnessed to make limitless energy. You got to remember that when this book was written, nuclear power was brand new, right? It was written in the 50s and then consolidated essentially in the 60s to a single novel. So that again, that gives you a time frame for why are they smoking cigars and not vaping, and why is nuclear power it's such an impressive feat, and these other periphery, which for our listeners, are the outer colonies around the outside of the galaxy, far from the center of the universe, which is where the Empire is run. Why are they using coal and wood-burning stoves, essentially, to run their cities?
Yeah, and I think another part of that is Anacreon talks about, or the guy from Anacreon is shocked when he comes to Terminus. So you have no peasantry? Where are your, poor, illiterate, working class that the nobles, reap their benefits from exploiting?
I think that's a good segue, Jay. The majority of the populace on Terminus is not involved in the encyclopedia effort. What are they doing?
farming food, I think, right? And, supporting I'm imagining it's a little bit better than like a, mining village, but, put enough people together and somebody opens a saloon and, has a dog fighting ring or, a weekly card game or,
somebody's making gin in their bathtub.
I'm sorry, did we just jump to a dog ring? In what world is that the fall of events for how society fills out?
So I was stepping off from a mining village, so it was, I thought of,
those poor miners.
White Fang or whatever it was.
Oh, God.
Oh, no. Yeah, okay. So it's bizarre to me that they present Terminus as this basically resourceless planet, right? It obviously has some kind of resources, right? Even if it's kind of naturally occurring nutrients in soil. They say, like, I don't know.
It's not industrial resources, right?
They're not industrial.
Yeah.
But they were even saying that they lack even iron as a resource. And so the Anacreon guy was like, well, you've got land, and we can divide up that land and use that as your resource. Like, you just have space that we can give people property rights.
We can make little fiefdoms out of or whatever.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
so I think you're edging on a little bit of kind of the climax at the end of this section, they're edging closer and closer to this crisis, right? Through the course of this section, and they think, especially the council believes that everything hinges on the encyclopedia. It's the direction from Harry Seldon and his organization is to establish the encyclopedia and to publish it, and this is what's going to protect man from the extended fall. And so they're all like hyper focused and, or laser, what's the latest buzzword? Like laser focused on encyclopedia related activities, right? And everything everything hinges on the success of this encyclopedia. So even when Dorwin comes, it's like all about showing him the encyclopedia, and he's so impressed, and these readings and whatnot. And Hardin's there the whole time saying, like, you guys are blind. You're so focused on your encyclopedia. You're not paying attention to this. You're not paying attention to Anacreon creeping on our sovereignty. You're not paying attention to the galaxy. Can't do anything about it. And, you're going to let the people down. And so close to the end, we get a flavor of Hardin, has more savvy than we realize at the beginning. He owns the newspaper, or he at least influences the newspaper. And he has like a whole kind of support network of or a party, if you will, that, allows him to kind of wield some degree of power, even though he doesn't have an explicit, role in the foundation, right?
Yeah, we find out he doesn't own the newspaper directly, right? He's smart enough to not do that. And then he manages to worm his way into the council to like the begrudging compliance of the scientists. And going back to our visit from our Imperial ambassador, the scientists all feel great after his visit. What does Hardin realize?
Yeah, he does like a legal. He solicits one of the scientists from the Encyclopedia Foundation to do a legal analysis on the treaty between the Empire and Anacreon, and
this is the founding treaty, right?
Say it again.
This is the founding treaty. This is not some kind of new treaty, right? This is the thing that establishes Terminus as
No.
Terminus.
No. There's two things he has analyzed, right? At least two. I know one of them is because they're concerned about Anacreon infringing on Terminus's sovereignty, right? And they know that Dorwin announces, well, we have established a treaty with Anacreon or whatever, and he offers to give them a copy, so they get a copy of this treaty, and Hardin has it analyzed by one of the Encyclopedia scientists, and he does a logic analysis so that he can communicate the message to the board, who are all these academics. And basically, the construction of the symbols at the end of the analysis indicates that the galaxy has no power over Anacreon, and they have required nothing of them, and Anacreon has committed nothing to the Empire. They are basically empty documents that have no hard commitments. And then the other thing he has analyzed is he's recording Dorwin the whole time he's there, and he hands over the transcript, has that analyzed, and the transcript winds up completely canceling out. Everything gets canceled out because there's nothing of substance in anything Dorwin has said the entire time he's at Terminus.
I found the exact line, coincidentally. Lord Darwin, gentlemen, in 5 days of discussion, didn't say one damn thing, and said it so that you never noticed. There are the assurances that you had from your precious empire.
Yep.
He's lit.
And I like that in 50,000 years, the swear words are consistent with, the 20th century.
There is zero language drift. That's how much they've stagnated. There is no incorporation of new words.
Exactly.
Although there is one major one that jumped out at me, and it's great space.
Yes.
Apparently everyone is atheist in the future. There is no spirituality, but there is a belief in space.
There's a couple subtle, like a heaven forbid. It's like space forbid. Yeah.
Either that or Asimov was afraid to blaspheme.
Yeah.
That's.
And then it's almost
I'm thinking atheism, but that's just bad. So.
Or I don't know if it's like we could go down a real bunny trail here, but the whole idea of atheism presupposes theism, which it's more maybe it's more non-theism. Like there's just no sense of a higher power, right? It's not like they're against religion or against believing in God. There just is no. It's drifted away. Like nobody recognizes like the idea of higher power, maybe. But yeah, you're right. It's like spaceman. Don't you get it? It's like
great.
It
great.
Is
great
it's
space.
Great space.
Start saying it all the time. But yeah, so there's this big blow up, right? Hardin is freaking out at the council, and it is brought to his attention by a man named Farah. Right? He's described as a great, like a large man who is soft, and Hardin is kind of astounded that he could be as big as he is. He mentions, he goes, the timing is fortuitous. The 50-year celebration is going to coincide with that Hardin's been trying to get going, by the way. He's trying to make a big party, trying to establish some kind of planetary or national unity around this event, which the scientists are poo-pooing because they don't want anything to be associated with or detract from the encyclopedia effort. But we find out that on year 50, Harry Seldon's got a little message for us that's going to be popping up. And Farah thinks that maybe the key to their solving their problems might be in this reservoir of knowledge from the past. right? Which is very in keeping with their belief system. The past will have all the answers.
Yeah, and so this is probably, I think that Asimov did a good job building even more tension in this section than the previous section, where he's actually got these kind of two, he's really building towards a crisis. He's got these two things happening, right? The council just wants everybody to sit tight and wait till Harry Seldon speaks, right? Put all your faith in Harry Seldon. And then Salvor Hardin is saying, we can't rely on Harry Seldon. We can't trust Harry Seldon. I can't trust the council. I got to take action. There's 1 million people here. We got to think for ourselves. And he's really kind of entrepreneurial almost, but on the political side.
We call those revolutionaries.
Revolutionaries. Okay. All right.
So he's a man of action. And what action is he going to take, Russ? What's Hardin planning?
He is planning to overthrow the sitting panel board of trustees so that there's a transition of power. They'll no longer be making decisions for Terminus.
So they're about to lose their authority one way or another. Is kind of what Hardin is thinking. And Hardin wants to be in control and protect the planet, essentially. I guess he's a first-generation Termini. I'm not sure what you would call a person of Terminus.
Is he first gen? Maybe he is, yeah, because he's younger than 50, probably.
Yeah, it's been about 50 years, right? Yeah. So he was probably born.
But he studies under the only other psychologist that was brought to Terminus.
Right.
He's a psychologist, but never fully indoctrinated. But he did study under the one psychologist that was allowed on Terminus.
Right. And that psychologist was very cagey, if I recall correctly.
Apparently, didn't teach too much to his pupils.
Yeah.
And he kept it close to the chest, which it sounds like this psychologist was trained by Harry Seldon in one way or another to kind of be this intermediary governor of some sort in the background. That was the vibe that I got from this particular section. So do we want to go into the big reveal?
Yeah, I think maybe before we do that, I think there's a few other things that I just wanted to bring up because it ties back to some of our discussion last time, and this is for Russ, but I think you were kind of on the train of thinking that war was inevitable and that it was going to be like all about war and all about conflict. And I just wanted to kind of prime you and see if you had any follow-up thoughts on that after reading this next section.
Yeah, I still think that war is imminent. I mean, whether it be civil war or actual interactions with other planets, planetary forces. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like if a coup isn't happening, then surely the Anacreons coming on will want conflict. So yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Were you not?
War never changes. Could this be the next opening to the Fallout video game?
Oh God.
War never changes.
I was thinking maybe there's one line in here that kind of hit me. I wasn't sure if it hit everybody else the same way, but there's a conversation where Hardin is talking about risk of conflict, and he says violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. But I certainly don't intend to lay down the welcome mat and brush off the best furniture for their use, when he's talking about Anacreon coming to set up a military base. And I thought that was pretty powerful, like that's kind of a core tenet of his thinking. and that his effort is really not to create war, but to avoid war. Did you guys not get that same vibe?
No, I certainly got it. It sounded as if he was prepared for it, but it was not his first instinct to resolve this issue, was not to go immediately to war.
I took it maybe even a step further to say that, the proper or skilled statesmen are successful when they resolve their issues by navigating away from conflict or away from violence. So I don't know. I have high hopes for Salvor Hardin. I think he comes across as like ambitious and sly, but I think in the end he's trying to accomplish something positive.
Some kind of noble goal, right? He's trying to,
seems like it.
At the very least, protect his people on Terminus.
Do we think?
Protect his fellow Termini.
Do we think that he's going to make it to the end of the book?
I don't know. I mean, we lost our first POV character after the first section. Gal.
Real quick.
Right, yeah. I mean, he was super boring. Literally our slack-jawed, wide-eyed protagonist for introducing us to this bizarro world, right? But I kind of expected to see him, like even a glimpse of him. But nope. That dude's probably dead. It's 50 years in the future.
But he was an essential backdrop for, learning the Harry Seldon story.
Yeah. I mean, he was the catalyst to the events, right? That was the trigger that made Terminus happen for Harry Seldon.
Yeah.
So in that sense, he's important, but he's also mad boring. It was mediocre at best. Well, things are coming to a head in Terminus. We have revolution brewing on the inside. We have invasion threatening from the outside. And in the middle, we have a message from Harry Seldon, 50 years from the past, to be open tomorrow. And we will be getting into that next time. We have been such nerds, and I've been your ringleader, Peter, along with
Jason
and Russ.
And we will see you next time.